For 8 months, no one had witnessed Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster fire a single shot in combat. But when 50 enemy fighters surrounded her unit deep in a European forest and sealed every exit, seasoned soldiers began falling one by one in a flawless ambush. The Ranger team had less than 5 minutes before total annihilation when Ariana climbed to higher ground 1,200 meters away, peered through her scope at targets that defied every law of probability, and reminded everyone why she'd kept her true skill hidden. Before revealing what happened when she finally squeezed the trigger, make sure to drop a comment saying where you're watching from and subscribe to Captain Joe's Stories, because what followed turned a guaranteed slaughter into a tactical masterclass that rewrote every rule of long-range warfare. The morning fog hung thick enough to feel like walking through wet cotton as Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster stood on the edge of Forward Operating Base Sentinel, watching the Eastern European forest fade into ghostly gray, while her team prepared for what Command described as a standard recon patrol. At 29, she stood average in height, wiry from years of lugging heavy gear across brutal terrain, her dark hair woven into a braid tucked under her patrol cap, ordinary by every standard the Army taught, except for the way she moved. Deliberate, fluid, every motion calculated to waste nothing. The XM110 semi-automatic sniper rifle rested on her shoulder like an old companion. Its 7.62 kaki format Tupipel Aminato rounds, officially accurate to 800 meters. Though Ariana had landed shots far beyond that range, the kind of distances that made weapon designers uneasy. In the right hands, its rapid-fire precision could devastate entire squads, and those hands hadn't fired it in combat for 8 long months. Sergeant First Class David Torres ran final gear checks, his movements shaped by 15 years of guiding Rangers through places where one mistake meant death. Broad-shouldered, built from carrying mountains on his back, eyes always scanning for threats. "Foster, you're with Davidson on Overwatch," Torres called, glancing at his tactical map. "Heavy foliage in Sector 9. I need eyes early and targets marked." "Copy that, Sergeant," Ariana answered, her tone carrying that cold professionalism that made people think she'd been assembled from a field manual. Corporal Ethan Davidson, her spotter, 23 and sharp-eyed, saw details most ignored, still young enough to believe experience could be learned from movies. He'd been paired with Ariana for 4 months, most of it spent trying to decipher her silence. "So rumor is Vegas started a betting pool," he said, as they packed their gear into the Humvee. "Whether you'll actually take a shot this deployment, or just keep pretending to be a sniper." Davidson teased, grinning. Ariana inspected her rifle without even glancing his way. "Maybe focus on your job instead of betting on mine, Davidson." The other Rangers laughed. After 8 months, she'd earned their respect for nearly everything. Navigation sharper than any specialist. Intelligence reports more accurate than officers twice her rank. Fire mission calls so precise they made artillery crews jealous. But not for the one thing she was trained to do: pull the trigger. Specialist Luis Reyes, their medic, looked up from his kit. "Lay off, Davidson. Not everyone proves their worth by showing off." "I'm not showing off," he started. "I'm just saying—" "You're saying too much," interrupted Staff Sergeant Kyle Morrison, the assistant team leader. 32, calm authority, the kind of NCO who led quietly and effectively. "Gear check. We roll in 5. The convoy moved out at 0700, 3 vehicles, 14 Rangers heading into terrain where conventional warfare meant nothing. The ancient forest canopy blocked satellites. The undergrowth was thick enough to hide armies. It was a perfect killing ground. Ariana watched through tinted glass, her mind mapping elevation, distance and cover. Every ridge was potential overwatch, every clearing a death trap, every shadow a possible ambush. Within minutes, the forest swallowed them whole. They dismounted at coordinates indistinguishable from anywhere else. Trees towering overhead, the damp smell of decay heavy in the air. Torres arranged them into patrol order. Point, main body, rear security, Ariana and Davidson set on overwatch. "Remember, reconnaissance only," Torres whispered. "Observe and report. We're not starting a fight, just making sure no one else is." They advanced with practiced stealth, slow and deliberate, disappearing into brush so thick you could lose a man at 10 meters. Ariana and Davidson took the high ridge above the route, her natural habitat. Calm patience, measured observation, constant awareness of every firing angle and field of view. Through her scope, she tracked the patrol's movement and the terrain beyond, watching for the smallest shift in foliage, the sudden flight of birds, or the glint of glass. "Serious question," Davidson muttered, scanning through his spotting scope. 8 months without firing a round. That's gotta be a record. Always been like that? Or something happen? "My job's to shoot when it fixes problems," Ariana said flatly. "Not to shoot, just to prove I can." What he didn't know, what only Torres knew, and only parts of it, was that Ariana Foster held more confirmed kills than anyone in the battalion, though none recent. Not since the incident, the impossible shot, the target that should have been untouchable, and the aftermath buried under layers of classification that made generals nervous. For 90 minutes, the patrol moved undisturbed, covering 4 clicks of brutal ground, logging old bunkers, rusted shell casings, remnants of forgotten battles. Then, at SO 9:47, Torres signaled, "Halt, enemy contact." The team froze. Rangers melted into cover, rifles up, eyes scanning. Ariana's scope found them before anyone asked. Movement in the tree line, 450 meters north, more than a few, moving like professionals. "Contact north," she whispered into the radio. "Multiple hostiles, platoon strength, maneuvering to flank." "Copy, Foster," Torres replied. "Maintain overwatch. All elements prepare to displace." Before a single ranger shifted position, the forest erupted in gunfire. The ambush was textbook. 3 assault elements, 1 blocking escape, 1 cutting the path, 1 raining fire from elevation. 50 enemy soldiers against 14 rangers, every move choreographed for total destruction. Automatic weapons shredded the undergrowth as rounds zipped past positions, thudding into trunks and throwing up clouds of dirt. The Rangers answered immediately, training overriding fear even as the scale of being outnumbered sank in. "Contact front, contact rear, we're F-boying surrounded," someone barked over the radio, voice straining against the gunfire. Ariana watched through her optic with a clinical distance that might seem heartless to anyone who didn't know emotional distance was what made accuracy possible. She could read the whole fight. Rangers trapped in a shallow depression with little cover, enemy elements closing from 3 directions. The math barreling fast toward a terrible outcome. "Foster, I need suppressive on that northern element." Torres's voice cut in over the radio, raw around the edges despite his training. "They're about to overrun Reyes's position." Davidson was already ranging targets. 450, wind left to right, multiple movers in dense cover. "Do you want me to start?" Ariana said softly. "What? Torres just gave you a direct order," Davidson snapped. "The northern element is a decoy," she interrupted. "I'm not leaving them out of my sight. The real threat is the ridge at 1,200 meters. They're emplacing a PKM with clear fields of fire over our whole team. Once that gun's up, everyone below dies. Davidson swung his spotting scope to her call. It took a few beats before he picked them out, tucked into defilade exactly where a competent commander would hide a kill weapon. "Okay, I see them. Call it in. Get Torres on it." "No time," she said. "They'll be firing in 90 seconds. Ariana's hands adjusted her scope, while her breathing slid into a controlled cadence. "And we're 1,200 meters out." 200 meters? Davidson's voice cracked. "Through this jungle on moving targets? That's impossible." 5 impossible shots? Ariana corrected conversationally despite the chaos. Machine gun, gunner, assistant gunner, loader, squad leader directing the setup. Miss anyone and they go live and kill everyone. Grenades detonated among ranger positions. Reyes screamed over the net about wounded. Morrison hollered they were low on ammo. "Foster, I'm serious," Davidson said, fear finally breaking through. "Ma, that's beyond effective range through concealment on movers. Even the best can't do that." "I am the best sniper alive," Ariana said quietly. "That's precisely why they hid me here. Now shut up and call my shots." Her finger found the trigger. Breath hit that perfect pause between inhale and exhale. The world collapsed to her reticle. The target at 1,200 meters moved with confidence. Too far. The odds against a hit stacked impossibly high. The XM-110's semi-automatic nature let her fire in rapid succession. Most snipers shoot, observe, correct, and shoot again. Ariana didn't have time for that cadence. The first shot cracked like thunder. The rifle cycled, brass ejected, a fresh round chambered as the first bullet flew. She squeezed a second before the first hit. Then a third, fourth, fifth, 5 rounds in 2.8 seconds, each tiny correction for wind, elevation, and target motion her brain solved faster than conscious thought. Through the scope, she watched results in compressed time. The first round punched center mass into the gunner as he settled behind the PKM. He slumped without comprehending the source of the strike from over a kilometer away. The assistant gunner looked up, bewildered, and took the second round at the base of his neck, collapsing instantly. The loader reached for ammo, and the third round found his chest. The squad leader moved, instincts screaming danger. Ariana had already predicted it. The fourth round dropped him mid-stride. The fifth shattered the PKM's receiver into scrap so that even a desperate hand couldn't make it fire. 5 hits at 1,200 meters through heavy vegetation, 5 shots, 5 kills, 2.8 seconds, and for a heartbeat, the forest fell into stunned silence. Even the attackers hesitated, baffled that their deadliest asset had been neutralized by an invisible, impossible threat. Davidson stared at Ariana as if she'd performed sorcery. "Holy how did you—" "Questions later," she cut in, already acquiring the next targets. "Right now, we finish this." She turned to the northern element closing to 550 meters, trivial by comparison, and her rifle began to speak in rapid, surgical bursts. Semi-auto let her engage multiple movers faster than they could react. Each round was placed not just to kill, but to maximize psychological collapse. Leaders first, destroying command, crew-served weapons next, eliminating heavy fire, then anyone trying to reorganize. The force that had relied on numbers found itself systemically dismantled by an enemy it couldn't see, locate, or retaliate against. Some returned fire into estimated sectors, shooting at ghosts. Ariana and Davidson hunkered down in thick concealment at extreme range, effectively invisible to anyone below, and the Rangers in the valley seized the moment to press their counterattack. Torres rallied his element, pushing forward with aggressive momentum as the enemy, suddenly worried about threats from directions they hadn't considered, began to scramble. Southern element breaking, Davidson reported through his spotter, watching fighters peel back. They're running. Ariana already had them tracked. Retreat was fine. It meant they no longer threatened her Rangers, but she made sure the cost of initiating the ambush was clear. Precision shots picked off anyone still carrying weapons or trying to coordinate a withdrawal. The attackers had started the fight with tactical superiority, numbers, and prime positions. Now they were learning the hard truth that those advantages meant nothing against someone who could reach them from ranges they assumed were safe. Ariana's rifle continued its steady work. Every round was a calculation, a deliberate decision, and an execution. She wasn't firing from anger or vengeance. Emotion had no place in precision engagement. She was solving a tactical problem, and the solution was to make sure the enemy understood that ambushing American Rangers brought consequences. Through the scope, she watched their formations crumble. Coordinated units dissolved into individuals making survival choices. Some dropped arms and fled. Others tried to carry wounded. A few attempted covering fire, but were firing blind at an unseen threat. Davidson called observations with a tone that mixed professional clarity and barely controlled awe. Eastern group in full retreat. Western element has halted and is taking cover. Northern element, Jesus, Foster, there's nobody left in the northern element. Ariana answered evenly, already moving her aim to fresh targets. The Western element's the last organized resistance. The Western group had rallied behind a natural berm trying to reform. Their commander, obvious by where men oriented toward him, was working to restore order and push his troops to fight rather than flee. Ariana watched the man through her optic, ran the math, wind, distance, slight downhill angle, and made a choice that was tactical and psychological. Rather than kill the commander outright, she struck the ground at his feet. The impact blasted dirt and small rock into his face, making him flinch and drop for better cover. She fired again, closer this time, and a third round cracked so near his position he likely heard the supersonic snap. The message was unmistakable. I can kill you whenever I choose, but right now I'm choosing not to. Run while you still can. The message landed. The Western element collapsed entirely, abandoning positions and melting back into the trees as the commander, one of the first to run, let survival instincts overcome discipline. The firefight had lasted 19 minutes from first contact to final round, and when it was over, the 50 attackers were reduced to scattered survivors fleeing through the woods, leaving the dead, the wounded, and weapons behind. The Rangers held the ground with 0 fatalities, though Reyes was busy treating multiple wounded. The ambush that should have annihilated them had been undone by precision fire from distances most people would call impossible. Torres's voice came over the net, steady but threaded with disbelief. Foster, Davidson, link with the main body. We're consolidating and calling medevac. Ariana secured her rifle and began dismantling her hide with the same meticulous care she'd used to set it up. Davidson still stared. "Who the hell are you, really?" he asked at last. "Designated marksman," Ariana answered, shouldering her rifle. "Same as yesterday. Help me clear brass and move." They made for the Rangers forming the defensive perimeter, and the change in how people looked at Ariana was instant. Before she'd been the silent one who never fired. Now she was something else. Dangerous, respected, maybe feared. Torres met her at the line, face deliberately neutral. Hell of a performance, Foster. Just doing my job, Sergeant, she said. 1,200 meters through vegetation. 5 shots in under 3 seconds. He shook his head slowly. 15 years in the Army, and he'd never seen anything like it. Reyes approached, hands bloody from treating casualties, but gratitude plain on his face. 4 of my wounded would have bled out if you hadn't broken that ambush. Thank you. Morrison came up next, his usual quiet replaced by something like reverence. I didn't even see that machine gun position until you started shooting. If they'd got it online, Ariana began. They didn't, she finished simply. That's what matters. Private First Class Tyler Brooks, one of the younger Rangers pinned in the worst of the fight, couldn't help himself. Ma'am, I counted at least 23 shots. Did you miss any? Ariana thought a moment. No. The single word hung there. 23 fired, 23 hits, from 550 to 1,200 meters through heavy vegetation on moving targets under combat stress. And Brooks's face showed that his sense of what was possible had just been fundamentally altered. Davidson sat beside Ariana while they waited for extraction, cleaning his spotting scope. That thing people whisper about, the incident that got you moved, did that involve shooting? He asked quietly. You're smart enough to stop asking, Ariana replied, though her tone softened. Fair enough, he said after a beat. For what it's worth, glad you're with us. Me too, she answered. The after-action review took place in a secured briefing room with the battalion commander, company commander, and intel officers from higher headquarters assembled to figure out exactly what had happened. Torres walked them through the tactical picture with maps and imagery showing the ambush and encirclement, then the part that explained survival. Staff Sergeant Foster engaged from an elevated position at ranges exceeding 1,200 meters. Initial priority was crew-served weapons posing the greatest threat. Follow-on engagements systematically removed enemy leadership and heavy weapons, breaking their attack and forcing withdrawal. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel James Hendris, studied the map with a face trying to reconcile the briefing with what he believed possible. 52 combat tours had taught him to expect everything, until now. Sergeant Torres, you're telling me one sniper with a semi-auto engaged and wiped multiple targets at ranges well beyond standard effective limits through dense vegetation with the precision and speed to shatter a coordinated ambush, he said, disbelief wrapped in measured tone. Yes, sir. Exactly that, Torres replied. Hendris shifted his attention to Ariana, who stood at rigid attention. Professionalism carved into her posture, as if she wanted nothing to do with this exchange. Staff Sergeant Foster, where did you receive your training? He asked. Multiple places, sir, she answered. Basic Army Sniper School, then advanced courses through Special Operations Command. The word Special Operations hung in the air. Hendris let it sit. And why are you assigned to a conventional ranger company? He continued. Requested transfer, sir. Personal reasons, she said succinctly. The intelligence officers exchanged glances that suggested they understood those personal reasons better than open discussion allowed. Hendris made a choice and dismissed everyone except Staff Sergeant Foster. Once the room emptied, his tone tightened, but remained professional and direct. I've read what I'm cleared to read, sections redacted at levels above me, which implies you were doing things almost nobody knows about, he said, then paused. The shot you made today, initial engagement at 1,200 meters on multiple moving targets through concealment, matches capabilities I've only heard whispered about in classified briefings. So answer me plainly. Are you still operational for the unit you came from? Ariana met his look steadily. No, sir. I'm assigned to this company. What I did today was protect my Rangers with skills I developed over my career. Nothing more. And if I asked you to repeat that shot to protect Rangers, you would? He asked. If Rangers needed protection, I would, sir, she replied. Hendris regarded her for a long beat, then nodded. Fair enough. You saved 14 lives today, Staff Sergeant. That outweighs whatever complicated history brought you here. Dismissed. Ariana saluted and left, feeling Hendris's gaze follow her to the door. That evening, the team room atmosphere had shifted entirely. The Rangers who'd survived told the story to anyone who would listen, stretching details only a little because the truth itself was spectacular. Davidson became Ariana's unofficial narrator, miming with his hands how she'd fired 5 impossibly fast rounds. She just boom, 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 and 5 guys over a click just dropped like the world glitched, he said. Reyes added his perspective. Without that first shot on the machine gun crew, we'd have been shredded. No exaggeration. Trapped, surrounded, about to be wiped. Torres watched Ariana navigate the sudden attention with visible discomfort, caught her eye, and gestured her over. You okay? He asked softly. Not used to being the center of attention, she admitted. I preferred it when people assumed I couldn't shoot. Why hide it? Torres asked quietly. 8 months here. Never once showing what you can do. Ariana was silent for a moment before answering. Because the last time I showed what I could do, it triggered a diplomatic incident that 3 governments had to quietly fix. Target neutralized. Mission success, she said. The shot I made then, distance, conditions, the impossibility, drew dangerous questions about how one sniper could make physics-defying shots. And those questions led to uncomfortable places. So they sent me here to essentially retire me. They sent you to be a regular soldier, do regular things, keep your head down, she said, gesturing around. Clearly it hadn't worked out. Torres offered a small smile. For what it's worth, I'm glad it didn't. You saved my Rangers. That matters more than whatever political bulls made someone nervous. The next morning, Ariana was summoned to company headquarters. Captain Nicole Chen, solid, competent, and respected, gestured for her to sit and began. I got a call last night from people who somehow have my direct line. They wanted details on your performance and whether you're maintaining proper operational security about your capabilities. Ariana's face didn't change, though. Inside, she swore. What did you tell them, ma'am? She asked. I told them one of my Rangers performed heroically under fire, saved American lives, and I'm proud to have her in my company, Chen replied. She leaned back. They weren't pleased. Suggested you might need reassignment somewhere even quieter. Ariana's eyes narrowed. Ma'am, Chen raised a hand. I also told them if they tried to reassign you, I'd fight it through every command level I could and make the political cost of burying you abundantly clear. She smiled, but the callers liked that even less. Ariana managed a tight, "Thank you, ma'am." Chen cut her off. "Don't thank me yet." The compromise was that you stayed with the company but were attached to battalion headquarters as sniper section leader. Train designated marksmen, build long-range recon skills, pass on expertise without making blatantly impossible shots that attract unwanted attention. Not ideal, but better than being buried in supply. I can work with that, ma'am. Good, Chen said. Between you and me, Foster, having someone with your skill set in my battalion helps me sleep. Try not to break physics too obviously when people are watching, she added with a half smile. 3 weeks later, Ariana stood on the range with 8 of the company's designated marksmen, teaching advanced, long-range engagement, while Davidson, who'd requested a transfer into the sniper section to work with her, watched. "The thing about impossible shots," she said, rifle in hand, demonstrating proper position, "is they're only impossible until you account for every variable: wind, humidity, temperature, altitude, Coriolis, ballistic coefficient. Not magic, math. And math is learnable." She fired. An 850-meter target vanished. Again and again she hit rhythmically, proving it wasn't theory but lived experience from someone who'd made ridiculous distances look ordinary. After class, Davidson came up. Question: your shot at 1,200 meters through vegetation. Multiple targets. You said it was just understanding variables. Right, she said. Some of us tried to recreate it. Even with perfect variables, the odds look tiny. Ariana nodded. Which is why most people can't do it. But you can. Why? He asked. She considered carefully. When I look through a scope, I don't see obstacles or impossibilities. I see solutions. Each variable becomes a factor to include. Each problem is another calculation. When the math says the shot is possible, even just barely, I trust the math and pull the trigger. She paused, watching students work the line. Also, she added quietly, because sometimes rangers need protecting and the only thing between them and disaster is one person willing to take shots everyone else calls impossible. You make the shot and handle the fallout after. Davidson nodded, absorbing more than she'd said. For what it's worth, really glad you were watching our 6 that day. Me too, Davidson. Me too. The story of the forest spread through military channels fast. Details bloomed. Some claimed 100 enemies downed single-handed, others 2-kilometer shots. Yet the truth stayed. When 14 rangers faced certain death, one sniper made improbable distances routine and brought them home. Over the following years, Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster trained dozens of snipers, passing on lessons absent from manuals. Some students moved to special operations. Others stayed in conventional units, but carried a new understanding that limits are often failures of imagination. She never spoke of her special ops time or the classified missions that made governments nervous, but sometimes late in the team room, someone would ask the longest shot she'd ever made, and she'd smile a private smile and say, 1,200 meters through vegetation, 5 targets. That's the longest I'm allowed to talk about. The unspoken part, what everyone tacitly understood, was there had been longer, stranger shots in places that officially didn't exist, and those missions were classified at levels where even asking could end careers. What mattered was the present. Training the next generation and being ready when impossible shots were needed. Because sometimes mission success isn't better tech or more bodies, but one person with a rifle who looks at the math and says, "Watch me." The quiet professionals prepare for moments they hope never arrive. When they do, those pros make the impossible seem easy and then go back to being quiet. Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster was one of those professionals, and the 14 Rangers who walked out of that ambush alive would tell you the most dangerous person on the battlefield is often the one you didn't know was there until bullets started flying true from distances that shouldn't have been possible. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They might just be waiting for the right moment to remind everyone what real professionals look like when the stakes are life and death. The enemy force that had planned so carefully, positioned so perfectly, and executed their ambush with textbook precision would carry that day's lesson through generations as a warning. In modern warfare, no one is ever too far to be touched, never too hidden to be seen, And sometimes the one you should fear most is the one you never even knew was watching. Ariana kept working quietly, shaping the next wave of precision shooters, passing down lessons carved from years in places few would ever step foot. She taught mathematics and ballistics, wind reading and environmental calculation. But more than that, she taught patience, restraint, and the understanding that the best shot isn't the first you can take, but the one you wait for until it's the only one that matters. Across ranges on countless installations, young snipers practiced their craft, testing limits, pushing boundaries, and occasionally, when the wind was steady and the math aligned perfectly, they'd make a shot that defied belief and think of Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster, the quiet professional who proved that impossible just meant no one had done it yet. Years later, when historians examined the battle, they'd struggled to quantify what she'd done in that forest. Reports were meticulous, ballistic data irrefutable, but the math still seemed impossible. 23 shots, 23 hits, ranges between 550 and 1,200 meters, all moving targets through thick vegetation, no misses. The odds were so infinitesimal that analysts suspected exaggeration. They were wrong. Davidson, by then a sniper instructor himself, kept the spent brass in a small wooden box on his desk. When students boasted about their skills, he'd open it, show the casings, and tell them about the quietest person he'd ever known, who became the deadliest when it mattered most. "She didn't just save our lives," he'd say softly, holding a casing between his fingers. "She redefined what we thought possible." Then he'd close the box, smiling faintly. And after that, she went right back to being so quiet you'd forget she was even in the room. That's what a true professional looks like. The surviving enemy fighters never forgot either. In dim bars and hidden safe houses across Eastern Europe, whispers spread, not as boasting, but as warning. There was an American sniper, they'd say, who could reach you from distances you thought were safe, who could see you when you thought you were invisible, who could end you before you even knew danger was near. They called her the Ghost in their language, a fitting name for someone who worked unseen, turned the impossible into routine, and reminded everyone that in modern combat, you are never truly safe. You're just waiting to find out if someone like her is watching. Ariana Foster never sought fame, never wanted her name printed or her face plastered across recruiting posters. She understood that the most effective warriors were the ones no one knew about until it was far too late. She continued training others, instilling not just the techniques of marksmanship, but the mindset that made miracles possible. The realization that limits live in the mind, and that with discipline, patience, and faith in the math, impossible becomes difficult, and difficult becomes done. And sometimes, when her former students found themselves outnumbered, surrounded, and staring down odds that logic said they couldn't beat, they'd remember her calm voice in their minds, slow their breathing, trust their training, and take the shot no one else believed could be made, because she had already proven it could. In that, she gave them something more powerful than skill: certainty. Certainty that impossible is just another word for not yet attempted by the right person. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage from Captain Joe's stories.